Okay, we are back in Visual Studio and we're going to work on showing our inheritance examples. So we're going to add some new items. We're going to need some new header files. The first one's going to be for a mammal. Name the class starting with a capital letter. And then we are also going to have one for a reptile. And I want to show you how we start this in Visual Studio, but a little bit later on I might be copying and pasting in code that I've already pre-written. And we are going to add then our implementation files, which are .cpp files for both of those classes. So we will have a .cpp for mammal, and we will have a .cpp for reptiles. And so we can see I have all my previous versions of drivers. I have created a new driver here with inheritance. It's going to be the same as what we left off with, except that I've removed, or I'm going to remove writing out. I already removed writing out to a file. And so that's going to be our starting place. If we take a look at the mammal.h and the reptile.h, I'm going to pause and cut and paste some code in here, and we will be back in just a moment to look at that. I pasted a previous version of mammal into the file here, and then I went to my driver, and there are going to be, I went to my implementation file, and there are a plethora of errors. And I was going to fix all of these, but I decided this might be a good learning opportunity for us all. And one of the things that is occurring, if you notice in my mammal.h, is I named this with a lowercase mammal here, and I want to use good programming practices, and all class names are generally begun with a uppercase letter. So I'm going to use a search and replace in order to fix this. And it's a nice feature, especially if you guys are going to be editing some files, etc. So we are going to do a quick find, and then I am going to look for mammal, lowercase, and then I'm going to do a replace. So if I come over here and toggle, I'm going to do, I have to find my replace, find next. One of these options is for replace. Get the right drop down menu, and I'm going to replace all lowercase mammals with uppercase. And I can click to find next and hit replace, or I can choose replace next, replace next, replace next. I could have also chosen to replace all. Now if I go to my mammal.cpp, I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to do a find and replace. That's found under edit. We are going to do a find and replace. And all lowercase mammal we're going to replace with uppercase mammal, and I believe I can replace all. 8 occurrences, double check that it got all of those, and then I need to fix my std, connecting the namespace there. And then there's another error message that showed up. And you can also see that I used a different style of naming. So I'm going to use underscore for the class level variables. Changing to underscore did not correct the error here. So let's see what the error message says. It says here, animal total food declared at line 10. Inaccessible. So if we look at the error inaccessible and ignore the long path name there, that's what we want to pay attention to. And if I hover over weight and I scroll all the way to the end and I look error, it says it is inaccessible to the far right. And the other error that I get here is error class animal has no member get info. And if you remember, I added that method and decided I was going to change my class diagram, so to speak. So this is also a good example of why you want to plan ahead on your class diagrams, because if you go back and start to change things, everything gets compounded, because now I not only have to change my subclass, I need to go back and change my superclass, and that is where we're going to start. So if I go to animal.h, first thing I need to do is add my getInfo method, because that was a method that I added, and it's not going to return anything. Then I have to change my animal.cpp, and I just realized over here that I put mammal.cpp and reptile into my resource files, but that's easily fixed by clicking and dragging them to the source file. If we scroll down, I want to look at animal.cpp, and we need to add a method for animal. That's getInfo. And for right now, due to time, I am just going to output right now. This is going to be animal info. And we will probably create a template here for just some standard output. And so we will have the name, and a weight for the animal. I do want to use my getter methods. Actually, if I use the getter methods here, and I use underscore name here, this is a good point where, because I'm at the class level, I have access to these instance fields, so I can just use underscore name here, or I could use the get weight method. Both of those should work. I think I will leave that in there for now just to demonstrate that. When I go back to mammal.h now and mammal.cpp, I have taken care of the getInfo error, but I still have this error message here on the fact that weight is inaccessible. And the problem with that is in the animal class, if you remember when we created our animals, we made all of these variables private. Because I'm going to be creating a subclass, I want to be able to have access to these variables, and in order to do that, I want to have access at the proper level of accessibility. There is another keyword that we're going to introduce here, and that's going to be protected. I also just remembered in my mammal.cpp something I did not tell you. So let's take a look at it. Because I copied and pasted this code, is how do you actually link, so to speak, the superclass and the subclass is this line right here. So I have class mammal colon public animal. So mammal's my subclass and animal is my superclass. And so that is necessary in order for me to access the superclass. But because I also didn't make my superclass variables protected, I can't access them from my subclasses. So I'm going to change this protection level. This is a new one. We have public, private, and now we have protected. If I change that to protected and I go into mammal.cpp, those errors now are removed. And that's because I have access now to these variables that are in my superclass. They are protected, which means a subclass can access them, but no other methods can. And so the protected just adds it allows that access from the subclass to the superclass on those variables. I have one more error to deal with, and that is in my constructor. This is saying that there's two overloaded. It says no instance of an overloaded function mammal matches the specified type. And that's telling me that there is a mismatch between my parameter lists. So if I go back to my mammal.h first, I notice that I have 3 parameters there, and that's actually left over from the previous year's examples. If you guys watch some of those on YouTube, you'll see that. I've put all those in a folder for you on YouTube, the 2016 zoo examples. And so I should be able to have my mammal classes working. If I go to my driver now, we are going to, instead of reading in from a file, I'm going to just create some local mammals locally and run the code to see if we've got everything properly set up. I removed all of the data files information just to show how we can now create a mammal using our constructor. So I created our 2 mammals, lion and tiger. Lion is Enigma 210 and the tiger was Zim 200. I did a pushback of both of those individually to our vector, and then I outputted our vector. And if we look, I'm just using the output from a vector there. I am not using what would be called our getInfo method yet. I'm going to show you how that's going to work. So I'm just using the vectors and doing a output using the bracket notation similar to what you would have in an array. But I already have, or no, I didn't already have, but I went ahead and wrote the getInfo method that we decided to add from our other program version. And if I look at my getInfo method, it's going to basically output the same thing. But what I want to show you is that I am going to use in mammal.cpp, the getInfo method is going to say that it's a mammal, because now remember we have mammals and reptiles, so I want to specifically say it's a mammal. And then I'm going to call the superclass getInfo method to output all of the information. So if I go back to main and I comment out using the local vector, now I'm going to call zoovector and it's going to use the subclass and superclass constructors. And so you also will notice that I had it start to print the total food. We haven't used the feed method yet at all, but now we have the output and it is actually using both the getInfo from the mammal, and that is then calling the animal getInfo method, which fills in the rest of the information. Let's go ahead and feed the animals some food, and then we'll come back and look at what that output produces. One last error message though, I noticed when we were running this there was an error message or a warning. I'm going to look at that warning. And I believe that's going to have to do with what they call an unsigned integer. It says warning signed/unsigned mismatch. Warnings will allow your program to run, and they're usually kind of hints as to how to make your code a little bit better. This particular message that you're getting is wanting us to put or use an unsigned integer here. And you can leave it as just int, or you can use the unsigned int. If you do use unsigned int, then it will remove that warning. So as you're running your code, warnings will still allow you to run your code. They're usually hints by the compiler, and there's some things and settings we could probably change to get it to not give us a warning, but we're not going to worry about that in this course. I'm going to go ahead and feed the animals a few things just so you can see how that output differs, and then we will wrap up this video. Within the for loop, I went ahead and fed each of the animals 10 pounds of food. And if we run, we can see that Enigma weighed 220. Total food consumed is 10. Zim weighs 210. Total food consumed is 10. And if I go back and print after we're all done processing, the animals was 210, 200. We should have gotten a different weight. And verifying that the weight is different, Enigma was 210 and is now 220, and Zim was 200 and is now 210. Now there is something going on here with the processing of the total food consumed at the zoo, and we will handle that in our next video. that is it for this one.